I mean, if we're going to talk about like Bechdel test, unclear if this movie passes.
Doesn't count. Welcome to Rom-Com Bomb, a sex ed with DB podcast series where in every episode we go under the covers with a beloved rom-com, strip away its hidden toxic messages, and rewrite the script on love and sex. Valentine's Day is around the corner, and you haven't shopped for your boo yet. I'd love to introduce you to Aria, a service for couples that makes it easy to break out of routine, deepen emotional connection, and energize their relationship with curated experiences called scenes. And let me tell you, they are hot as hell. Woof! Plus, hand-picked premium items delivered discreetly to your door. If you want to gift your boo something that's actually a secret gift to yourself, get a Valentine's Day gift card to Aria at arya.fyi and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off now. I'm about to get personal here, so listen up. I'm going to tell you a fun fact about me that you definitely didn't know. The lube that I use most consistently is Uberlube. I really mean it. If you were here with me right now, I'd tell you to go over to my nightstand drawer and tell me what you see. That's right, you would see a bottle of Uberlube. If you've never heard of Uberlube, let me tell you about it. Uberlube is a silky smooth silicone-based lube recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list makes it widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. Another amazing thing about Uberlube is that it doesn't leave a sticky residue like water-based lubes do. It lasts for a long time and doesn't stain clothing or bedding. I have 3 bottles of Uberlube on my bedside table right now, ready when I need it. If you're someone who wants to feel more pleasure in the bedroom, use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at uberlube.com. Are you falling into a pattern with your partner? Looking to change things up but aren't sure how? Me and my partner exit our ordinary with Lion's Den. Lion's Den has hundreds of your favorite brands to help you and your partner reconnect or try something new. From novices to dungeon masters, there are products for every comfort level. With 50 plus years in business, Lion's Den is here to help. Can't make it to a local store? Shop online and chat with a customer service team member while you shop. Lion's Den offers our listeners 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. Hello, everyone. All my sweet listeners. Welcome back to Rom-Com Bomb. Today, we are joined by someone who knows rom-coms from the inside out. We have Savannah Hankinson, head of development at Meet Cute and former assistant to rom-com royalty like Nancy Meyers and Rob Marshall. She's gone from reading scripts for Something's Gotta Give to shaping the future of romance stories, which makes her the perfect person to help dissect this classic that we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Savannah. How are you?
Hey, Danielle. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this classic.
Yes. Ooh, there's so much good stuff in this. But first, we're going to remind you all of the trivia teaser. Yeah, we are holding our heads in anticipation of the trivia teaser we shared last week. This movie started as a dark cautionary tale called $3,000 until an exec from a company you would not expect decided to transform it into the most famous shopping spree of the 90s. Today we're reviewing Pretty Woman. Holy hell. We're doing 2 J-Rob movies in a row. The first episode of this season was Notting Hill. Excellent film. Of course. Yeah, Chef's Kiss. And now we're doing Pretty Woman. Savannah, how excited are you?
I am beside myself.
She can't speak.
I can't speak. I will also preface this by saying I had not seen this movie in probably 20 years. Probably since I was like 13.
This is, Savannah, this is why we're doing that. I'm giving googly eyes. This is why we're doing this podcast, to do a rewatch and really reassess what happened in our 13-year-old minds as millennial gal pals and what is going on now and how can we rewire our brains. And you're doing exactly that. So great work on just being yourself.
Thank you. It's hard.
It is a challenge. Okay, I'm also equally excited. I actually saw this movie for the first time kind of recently, which we'll get into a little bit more in our next segment. But first, I'm thrilled to go over this movie. There's chock full of good stuff, chock full of hotties, chock full of bodies, chock full of problems, chock full of George Costanza from Seinfeld. Mouth agape at his character. Okay, so if you, listener, have not watched it lately, here's a quick refresh. Julia Roberts plays Vivian Ward, a sex worker who gets hired by wealthy businessman Edward Lewis, aka Richard Gere, to be his escort for the week of business events. What starts as a business arrangement turns into an unexpected romance that challenges both their assumptions about love, class, and themselves. More on the trivia that I shared about the movie $3,000 at the end of the episode, so stick around. And first, we're going to get into our first segment, which is as a kid. So you are the perfect person to ask this. Like, as a 13-year-old, tell me your history with this movie. How did it impact your understanding of relationships and sex when you first saw it?
Well, I definitely came from a family that I don't think I've ever watched a sex scene all the way through until the past couple years, because I used to watch romantic comedies with my family and we used to fast forward through,
of course,
any sort of sexual scene.
Too much.
So I will say, I think I didn't know it was an R-rated film.
Oh, yes.
And I was delighted upon rewatch that it was pretty sexy. For my 13-year-old, it is sexy, yeah. For my 13-year-old self, I think I remember the red dress. I remember the clasp of the jewels. And I remember the walking into the store that had scorned her or spurned her. And she said, big mistake, huge.
Huge. Yes. Yes.
And I remember.
Yes.
Yeah. No, huge. Yeah. And I remember this beautiful, mature woman who was being attractive and sexy and given this better lifestyle by a rich, successful man.
Yes. He enables her to do what she has wanted to do. And at the same time, she's 22, I realize.
She is a child.
She is a
child.
Tiny little baby, which we will get into spoiler alert, she is treated like a child throughout this entire movie, you know? He kind of tells her over and over again what to do, what not to do. We'll get into it because that is a huge red flag for me, the way that he talks to her and treats her throughout this film. Mm-hmm. But it's partially because, she's little. And I think he is like 40.
He is,
in filming this film. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think she was, 22 and he was 40, 41. But it's not just that she is a child. She acts like a child too, which is of course very endearing. But upon watching, I was like, oh my God, she's like a teenager. She acts like a teenager.
Yes.
And I also have no idea what age she is supposed to be in the film.
Right.
Almost, except that I know it's young.
She mentions that she only got to 11th grade. Mm-hmm. So we can assume that she semi-recently was in high school. I think that's the assumption that I personally am making, which hilariously is not obviously not even a thing that they talk about in the movie. Like, it's just something that us upon the rewatch as women in our 30s now are kind of like, get this girl a blanket. Like, she needs some attendance. Like, she needs some attending to. It's just I'm afraid for her with this gigantic age gap. It's just so predatory. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I want to know, what scene do you think defined this movie for you?
The opera scene. I think as a 13-year-old, I think the opera scene defined this movie.
Tell me more.
And how moved she was, because and obviously I'm going to speak in a way that my 13-year-old self wouldn't, but it was like lowbrow meets highbrow, and you've officially made it if you can be moved in this very visceral way by something that's quote unquote highbrow. But I did think it was so beautiful because it is equalizing, because there's this woman who doesn't know what opera is, and she is being moved by just the emotions that we all feel, which is how I feel and why I love romantic comedies, because it lets you supersede any feeling you will have on a day-to-day basis. So I think that really usually I hate art about art, but I really like that moment. And I think that when I was 13, that is the moment that stuck out for me.
And I really like how he looks at her while she's experiencing this moment, right? Like we're going to talk about what works in this movie in a second, but I do think that their chemistry and the way that he adores her is something that keeps us coming back for more. And in this opera scene, she is starting to tear up because she is so, like, as you say, moved, kind of, overwhelmed at this story and at this music and at the acting. And he loves that he gets to introduce that to her, I think. And he loves to see that childlike wonder again come up. So I totally get that. What else do you think? Yeah, what elements of this film still work today? What do you still love upon the rewatch?
I actually really like a lot of it. I know, and I feel so weird saying that because I thought I was going to hate this upon rewatch. I thought it was going to stink of high heaven. But I think that Julia Roberts is just so damn good.
She's so good. That's my first bullet point. I love how funny she is and magnetic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even though she is childish, she is so vibrant and present and in control, which I think the movie does that great moment after the polo scene where she gets hit on by George Costanza and
freak.
He's disgusting. And it's this low for her and she acknowledges it. And it's about, losing her power. And I hate that she takes him back after that.
I know.
But I like that she got to punish him for how he treated her.
Yeah.
And I thought that a lot of the power dynamics, at least in what they are teaching each other, I think I remembered this, as I said, I remembered this as she gets rescued. And, they talk about this being like the Cinderella story. But in Cinderella, we don't get to see how Cinderella is fixing the prince. But in this movie, he changes a lot over the course of the film, and we get to see all of those changes. And I thought this movie also did a really good job of making me feel like she was actually always safe when she was with him. And that's like, he doesn't drink and he's pretty quiet, but not in a menacing way, just in like a lost kind of way. And I thought it did a really good job of almost castrating him because I was never worried for her in his presence. And as soon as you introduce a sex worker into storytelling, instantly there's something that you can be very afraid of. But I never felt that in this dynamic. And I thought that was way better than I expected it to be.
Agreed. I think it's brilliant the way that it is done. And at the same time, there's a lot that is wrong. And we're going to get into that in just a second. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. But before we get into That's Problematic, our most talked through segment of this show, I want to know, before you did the rewatch recently, what did you rate the film? 1 to 5 voms. 1, dated. We love it still, though. 5, burn all the DVDs.
I rated it a 4.
Before the rewatch?
Yes.
Okay.
I rated it a 4. It was going to be like at least a 4, thinking that it could go up to 2, 4.5 to maybe 5.
Oh, wow. You were about to max it out. Okay. I believe I rated it something like a 2, just because, again, this was not one that I had seen as a kid, and I saw it a year ago on a very small iPhone screen while I was very horny, mind you. So
you're obsessed with this film.
I'm obsessed I'm obsessed. Yeah, it's my favorite movie. But okay, so we're gonna talk about our ratings after That's Problematic for after the rewatch. But let's talk about the first segment of That's Problematic, which is this theme about the fairy tale, right? Like, let's talk through this kind of knight in shining armor trope that comes up over and over again in many of these rom-coms from this era. He buys her dresses. He gives her money. He's the one to go to the store with her to make sure she's treated correctly. He takes her to the opera for the first time, And I think like this kind of blends in with the way that she is treated like his child the entire movie, right? They
Ugh.
refer to her as his niece as like a code, right? You're giving heart out for
it's
that.
all awful. All of that is awful.
So bad.
It's awful. And it's not even funny anymore. It's so awful.
It's so bad. We got to really call a spade a spade. And I wrote down some examples of like how exactly she's treated like his child. He tells her to spit her gum out. Stop fidgeting. I'm talking to you, Vivian. Come back here. He calls the hotel and says, don't answer the phone. But then he calls again and says, I told you not to answer the phone. Like, part of it is that they're playing, but part of it is that he is making it clear over and over again that he is the one in charge and he is the one that gets to tell her what to do. Let me have it, Savannah. I want to hear everything that you think about this trope.
Yeah, I hate that. I think that also any implied incest, even if it's a joke, is something that's really skeeving me out.
Bizarre.
And I get that I just think that goes back to those disgusting, like, I mean, it's like literally, this is your gross uncle. And we've all had gross uncles or gross pervy parental friends or whatever.
Right.
And you're just like, this is not okay. And I get that this happens, but this is part of what I feel like we've like put to bed, not put to bed, but like what we've stopped putting to bed in Hollywood, which is like this kind of behavior and that kind of power dynamic isn't good.
Have you seen the movie Honora, which just came out recently?
I haven't seen it yet.
Ooh, okay. I won't spoil anything, but it is very much a modern Pretty Woman, but with a lot of these kinds of things missing. Like, it has a lot of the same tropes, but they approach it in such a different way. You'll have to come back on and talk about Honora as a follow-up to Pretty Woman. But I just think it really does show its age, right? Like, this movie came out in 1990, so 35 years ago. Julia Roberts, as we said, is 22. This is really like one of the first films, one of the first rom-coms to really put like its female protagonist in this position that they've put her in, which is attempting to make her seem more powerful and more authoritative than maybe potentially she quote unquote could be in real life or is in real life compared to him, right? Which is like a load of bullshit. But I do think that it is a moment of the times where it's showing, you know, how sex work is treated as a profession, how she as a sex worker is treated, and how money is kind of the solution to everything, right? Like, if you only just had a little bit more money, then you would be treated differently. So you've been with your boo for a while and the spark feels like it's kind of gone. But what if I told you I could take away the mental load of figuring out how to, quote, spice things up by doing the work for you and sending you everything you need? That's where Aria comes in. They set you up with a dedicated concierge, aka a real person and not a robot, who is available anytime you need them, and sends tips and tricks weekly as well as a monthly box of goods based on your needs sent directly and discreetly to your door to help you get started. Visit arya.fyi and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off now. Let's get that spark back. Flicking the bean, jilling off, menage a moi. All of these are creative and hilarious ways to say masturbation. For 21 days, I embarked on what started as a personal masturbation experiment with one of my all-time favorite vibes, the magic wand. The goal? To answer one burning question. What is the impact of daily magic wand use on my health, wellness, and sexual experiences compared to regular sexual activity and no sexual activity? Spoiler alert, the results were so surprising, they've inspired me and the Magic Wand team to turn this experiment into a full-fledged study. Now 1,000 other people are diving deeper into how consistent self-pleasure affects everything from mental health to sexual satisfaction. Want to see the hypotheses and the results from my study? Head to sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment to check it out. In a world that constantly encourages you to change, it's bold to just be yourself. Sexual expression and satisfaction are different for everybody, so rather than conforming to others, focus on falling in love with who you are. Lion's Den sources the very best products to help you find what you like, and to help you feel confident expressing your sexual desires. You can get 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com to begin exploring everything about yourself. Follow them on social at Lions Den Adult on Instagram and TikTok.
Are you tired of waiting for sparks to fly on your dating app? Do you dream of running through airports to deliver an out-of-breath, unplanned monologue? Then stop doom scrolling and start listening to Meet Cute Rom-Coms. Feel-good love stories that take you from chance encounter to grand romantic gesture in just 15 minutes. We're bringing rom-coms back. Get a brand new Meet Cute series on the first Tuesday of every month with new episodes twice a week. Fall in love with Meet Cute Rom-Coms wherever you find your podcasts.
Is this where we kiss?
I think this is the most famous scene pretty much that everyone knows, which is she goes to a store, you know, in her sex worker clothes. They're like, we have nothing for you here, because they're trying to show that they're high class and she is trash. And the next day she comes back and she already has her makeover, and she just loves to go and throw it in their face and say, hey, do you remember me? I was here yesterday. You wouldn't wait on me. And they say, oh, I'm so sorry. And she says, do you work on commission? And they say, yes. And she says, big mistake. Huge, huge mistake. So that's like iconic. Do you have any thoughts about how this kind of adds into this whole story of kind of her becoming high class over the course of this week?
Yeah, well, I think that part of me was worried that she was going to lose who she was. And I think, I mean, if we're going to talk about like Bechdel test, like,
yes,
unclear if this movie passes.
Doesn't count. It does count. They're not talking about a man.
That is true. It passes there. But I worried that Vivian was going to lose who she was by having this money. And I was scared about how she was going to treat Kit, this person who didn't have the money and who didn't have, you know, the class that she had now obtained.
Right.
But again, I think because it's Julia Roberts, that fear didn't come to fruition. Like, it was okay. She really held on to who she was, and she made him come to her world.
Yes.
Like, she didn't go to his world at the end. He came to her world, climbed up her stairs, you know, and you don't see them land in his world.
The ending, let's talk about it really quick, because it really does kind of put the last feather in the cap of the fairy tale problematic trope, which is the whole movie we come to realize he is afraid of heights. And for her, he climbs, her fire escape, which we see her climb when she wants to get out of paying rent in the beginning of the movie. Perfect. And he goes up there and he says a line to her that's something along the lines of, you know, what happens after he rescues the princess, because she comes up with this whole story about, literally, she's talking about when she was little, she would, you know, picture a man or a knight in shining armor coming to save her from being locked in this tower that her mom locked her in. And so he requotes that and says, what happens now? And she says she rescues him right back. Right. So, so obviously we have a couple things going on here, right? Like, we can talk as much as we want about how problematic the fairy tale whole trope is. We know that she is like an independent woman who like clearly is different. Like, at the end of this film, we see her like she's going to move to San Francisco. She's going to get out of sex work, and she, you know, is changed because of him, theoretically. But she does make it clear, like, this is equal. Like, I am rescuing you too. And you made a point, Savannah, about, you know, he changes throughout the movie. He literally goes outside and touches grass more, that he's met her, not just business deals dollars. And I think that is kind of the moment where we're supposed to say, you know, okay, maybe our 13-year-old selves would see that line and say, there is hope for me to be an equal in this kind of relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, which is shockingly optimistic for what I thought this film was going to teach me.
Right.
Or reteach me as a 33-year-old.
Exactly.
But I think she has a lot more power than I thought. Although I don't think she needed to be rescued, because she wasn't the one with the drug problem. She wasn't the one who spent the rent. She was probably going to figure it out.
Right.
So I think when he uses language like rescue or you could be so much more.
Ugh, yeah.
I still think, you know, he needs to figure his shit out a little bit.
Throughout this is obviously sex work comes up a lot throughout this film. There's a lot of this, like, you know, agency versus victimhood in, in talking about like Skinny Marie, who's like a potential like acquaintance of theirs who in the beginning of the movie is found dead. And, there's kind of them like Kit and Vivian talking about, okay, should we get a pimp? Like, no, I need to be the one to kind of, set the shots. And at the same time, like, they can't make their rent. They are not sure what they're going to do. They're dodging the landlord in order to not do this. And throughout the film, everyone in the hotel, this 5-star hotel, and everyone in Richard Gere's world, Edward's world, it makes it very clear to her that she is not welcome. She is below them. She is trash. And so what do you think, I guess, in broad strokes about like the way that this is portrayed and the way that sex work is touched in this movie?
Yeah, I think it's pretty devastating, honestly, because I think 100% you are correct in saying that everyone treated her as less than because of what she does and how she dressed. And as soon as you slapped a dress on her, she got treated with more respect. Or as soon as they found out that she was with Edward, who had the penthouse in the hotel, she was allowed to be in the lobby.
Right.
But she was never welcome back in the future until the end when they become best friends, etc.
Right.
But I think that it was really, I think we see it epitomized by Philip Stuckey, played by Jason Alexander, George Costanza, when he, essentially tries to assault her and does physically hit her in the hotel room. And that is like the manifestation of how people think that sex workers can be treated. He still gets away with it. Like, he doesn't get fired. What was that, Edward?
I get that there are villains in films and that, like you're saying, the film damns him. My anger with like showing kind of consistent unnecessary violence towards women in films, just completely unnecessary, is so present. And I just think that we can find a villain that doesn't cause that kind of harm to women, which I know you agree with, but I just have to say it because it's so frustrating to me when the idea is kind of like, well, it's okay because we as the audience know he's an asshole. It's like, do we need those representations though shown over and over again?
No,
I don't think so.
Absolutely do not. And I think that the movies do not. And the movies of the 90s and early 2000s, the movies we grew up in that shaped our psyche around the value of women in culture, they specifically leaned on the trope of sexual domination, usually forced sexual domination. I'm avoiding a certain word right now because I don't want to give it a platform.
Right.
But dominating women. And that was character development for the women. And like, thank God this film didn't do that. But like, that is what this era of film does to women. And I'm so sick of it. Be better. A little bit better.
Yeah, do something else for the villain.
Be a little better.
Yes, we have to transition to the Cringe Corner, which is what we do every episode where we discuss, okay, what's one part of the movie that completely icked you out? And mine is the George Costanza assaulting J-Rob. What is yours? Would yours also be that?
It was the moment when that was horrible. I agree with you, horrible. But when Richard Gere said you could be so much more.
Ugh,
I think it's so condescending.
Infantilizing. Yes.
Yeah. And he was incredibly condescending for a lot of the film.
Yes. And there's, speaking of, the sex work trope of like sex workers equal bad and shouldn't be respected, he mentions, I never treated you like a sex worker, implying that sex workers are and should be treated poorly. And I hate this idea that because she is a sex worker, it is kind of tied to her being childlike, whereas we see Kit, right, be kind of like bossy, funny, like different in this way. And I do think that Kit is a more positive, in general, portrayal of a sex worker who made a choice to do that. Whereas Julia Roberts, we hear her backstory saying, I cried the entire time, the first time that I did it, which like, that is not how all sex workers feel. And most of them do not feel that way about a choice of work that they are getting into on purpose. Let's rewrite it. Let's rewrite one part of this film right now, either a character, a scene, something that happened And then we're going to finish with our final ratings.
Part of me wishes that it ended because he realized how stupid he was treating her. Like, I want it. I thought actually that I thought it wrapped up really neatly considering how many mistakes I think he made in the second half of the film.
Yes. Instead of him saying, I'll have an apartment for you and I'll squirrel you away. What if instead his offer to her was, I want to be with you. I'll move here to be with you and we can have a life here. Or what do you think about moving to New York to be with me? No pressure, but I love you and I think that you're fantastic and I want to be with you. That would be my rewrite.
I agree. It's not about being able to just put her in the corner where he's allowed to take care of her and visit her when he feels like it. Yes. It's about actually doing something together.
Yes. Be in an actual equal relationship. And again, keep that fucking chemistry alive. Keep having that good sex. Keep having that banter.
The sex is totally like communicative. Well, not communicative, but it's very balanced sex. So why can't some of the other power dynamics be a little bit more balanced?
Okay, Savannah, we're at the end here. We're going to go over our final ratings. What now would you rate the film given all of this information that we now know about Pretty Woman?
I really liked this movie.
Tell me.
I really liked it. It's a 2. It's a 2 for me.
It's a 2.
I'm saying it's like, go with a caveat, question it, but it's pretty great.
Okay, I respect that. I'm going to give it a 3 because I think that the little one-liners that Richard Gere's character has are just so fucking condescending that it just immediately increased it for me. And then obviously George Costanza is horrific. And so I know it's a caricature of an asshole, but I just hate it so much, which is why I need to increase it to a 3. Let's talk about those trivia deets that we mentioned in the early part of this episode. So $3,000. Do you remember that, Savannah?
I do.
The original script, titled $3,000, which is the amount that Edward pays Vivian for the week, by the way, was a gritty drama about drug addiction and class exploitation that ended with Vivian being kicked out of Edward's car and back on the streets. When Disney bought it, they completely rewrote the tone and ending, transforming it into the fairy tale we know today. The film went on to become one of the highest grossing romantic comedies ever made. Are you shocked?
Thank God. What a horrible movie that would have been.
God. Oh my God. Big yikes. It would definitely not make it to Rom-Com Bomb. I will tell you that much.
No.
Before I let you go, Savannah, I have next week's trivia teaser. Coming up next week, the wild true story that inspired this movie ended with a dramatic Oprah appearance and a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Don't miss it next Wednesday. And listener, dear listener, if you have a rom-com that you remember from growing up and you want us to talk about it, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and leaving a comment on Spotify. Savannah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Danielle. I'll talk to you anytime about rom-coms.
Anytime.
And vom. Anytime.
Maybe both. Perhaps both. Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our producer is Sadie Lidji. Our communications lead is Cathren Cohen. Our marketing coordinator is Alex Bateman. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. If you have a rom-com you remember from growing up and want us to cover it on Rom-Com Bomb, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and leaving a comment on Spotify. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on Instagram @sexedwithdbpodcast. See you next time.